Where did it originate? And then what does it entail, just referring to the BT through the AS 1 to 3?
Okay. So, from my understanding, like the original story or the kind of beginnings of AS came from Debbie Zappia, derived from Debbie Zappia. Now, Debbie Zappia, she was 2015. She was the only American to win WUSV. Like she was the only American to ever win it in 20 with her dog Eros, and she was like she's a multi-time like regional, national champion and like world level competitor for IGP, and she had been in the sport for years, and she had started seeing like certain things get taken out of the sport, and she started seeing just the sport kind of change, and then she got this idea like, this sport is no longer testing, and when I say the sport, we were referring to IGP. The sport is no longer truly testing, or it's not serving as like that kind of like breed worthy test that it once was, right?
Yeah.
Like to where it was like, all right, if a dog has an IGP, like that dog is something, like that dog knows some things, right? Like
Yeah.
we started getting further and further away from that notion that like IGP3s were almost just like handed out and thrown around like nothing, to where like you can look at a dog that's completely not breed worthy, or it's not something that you will want to continue a lineage on or to continue a kennel behind, and that dog has multiple IGP3s, and this is a dog that apparently is now worth breeding. She didn't really like feel that. She didn't really believe that, and I can't give like the exact timeline, but she started to like develop this idea of a sport that is still like IGP, like it still is a sleeve sport, right? It has very much many components of the IGP, but it is more modernized in how it is to be testing dogs, what actually we're going to be testing, and what are those exercises we're going to use to test those things, right? So when you think of like AS versus IGP, the main differences that I point out, and that I point out to people that are usually like new to it and asking, is the biggest one is that IGP you have tracking, AS you don't have any tracking. We go to detection.
Yep.
And that was something that was based off of the simple relevance of like dirt tracking today, right? Like there's not many instances or cases to where your dog is going to have to be doing a 300, 400-foot dirt track on a bad guy, right? Just the way that things have gone now developed, it is more relevant for dogs to have good detection skills, be able to
Mm-hmm.
search cars, be able to search, luggage and things of that nature. Like, so that's why now you have, all those aspects in place of tracking. As far as the obedience, a lot of the aspects still stay the same. Like you still have your heeling around a group, your sits in motion, your down in motions, which are like stand in motions, and recalls, retrieves, like all these basic simple components that you still have in IGP. Pretty much like the obedience aspect, a lot of that is the same. Now, as far as like the judging of it, AS judges are more so looking like, yes, we do want, or yes, they do want a very defined picture, right? They want a very like particular kind of picture, but it is not as rigid as IGP is, right? Like in AS, they're looking more so for the expression, for
Mm-hmm.
like a dog that is happy to be in said position, that is expressive in that position, that doesn't really show any signs of like like suppression or compulsion there. Like that's a big thing. Like that's a big thing that judges are looking at. Your healing style, how the dog tail sits, and like all these little things. Like still a meticulous eye, but it's now looking at different things, right? It's
Yeah.
just looking at a different aspect of it. So they're looking for more power. They're looking for more like, expressiveness in the dog's behaviors, whatever that may be, whether it's a send out, a retrieve, a jump, a frame. Like they are looking for dogs that are doing things with power, right? That's a big component. Whereas like in IGP, we've seen a lot of that aspect kind of fade a little bit, to where like the precision gave way to the power. Dogs were very super, super precise, but it really didn't look as strong. And that's not for everybody, but that was just like the general assumption, right? Like dogs were extremely precise, but you started to lose a little bit of power as time went on, and like that was another aspect that Debbie just kind of wanted to change and wanted to start to get back to. So even introducing things like the attack out of the blind, which you'll see in your AS1, that is a actual exercise that came from IGP, you know, a while ago, well before, I can't give exact dates, but that was a part of the IGP set of exercises in the very beginning, and that was something that was also taken out because of there was some objection to it, right? And then it was taken out, and it was just something that wasn't used as much. That was something that she brought back into play. even the style of catching. So like the style in which like we do catches, whether it's a long bite or attack out of the blind or reattacks or any of that is different. So we there's a Dutch style of catching, and that Dutch style of catching insinuates what's called a step through. So when the dog is coming, and what you see, and usually what like with IGP is that dogs come, and usually like your helper just kind of post up, catch the dog, put the dog down on either side, right? Like that's pretty much what you're going to see in every IGP trial. That's how they're going to catch dogs. They're going to come up, stop, catch the dog. For us, there is no real moment where you stop, right? You kind of really continue adding pressure onto the dog with, spatial pressure with your body, also with verbal, and then with your stick, right? So like your catch does not look like a static just sit here. Your catch looks more like you're driving into the dog, stepping around the dog, and the dog is to then, power through you. So there's a whole different layer, or there's a different set of challenges and a different set of testing that's happening within that catch as opposed to your IGP catch, which just goes back to this idea of constantly testing. And the big thing behind the creation of AS was that there this has to be something that we are using to gauge as to whether the dogs that are competing in this are stable to breed, are dogs that we want on the streets, are dogs that we want to put in, police forces, and that are stable and that can do all these things, because we're testing more than just, a simple dog's ability to hold on to a sleeve while there's a stick waving in his face,
Mhm.
right? And then like even before you get to that point, you have your BTs, which is the very first introductory kind of title that you can get. And there you're doing behavioral assessments, and you're also doing environmental assessments. So there's a dog aggression test to where your dog is basically back tied to a pole. You step out of the scene. A dog is to walk past your dog. If your dog shows any form of aggression, dog is then done, right? So like that's one of the things that was now a focus for AS as opposed to IGP. After that, you also have your environmental testing. So now you're testing for hunt drive, dog's ability to walk on slippery surfaces, unstable surfaces, walk upstairs and downstairs, go under tight spaces. All these little things that you would kind of expect of, your simple or like your run of the mill working dog, right? Like you would expect them to be able to do these kind of basic preliminary things. Those are the very first things that your dog is tested upon, and it's a pass or fail kind of thing. And the environmental aspect is something that it doesn't necessarily affect whether you pass or fail, but it's something that is always going to be attached to that dog's performance, and that is always going to be attached to the dog, right? So whatever results the dog gets for that, it's always going to be there with the dog for breeding purposes, for any assessment purposes, for any placements or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So that we're already setting it up to where even if you do the most minimal kind of titling with us, there is a form of testing that is then translating to whether this dog is suitable for work, breeding, or whatever. And that's the big kind of theme and the big component behind the creation of AS and the purpose of AS as of now. It is truly a barometer for testing and seeing whether, the dogs that are competing in this sport are suitable for, placements and, other venues, or to be bred to continue on, the lineage of high level working dogs, German Shepherds, Dutch Shepherds, Malinois, etc.
Yeah. And I think that's really important too, because I've seen so many IGP3 dogs where you see their video online. If you're looking into it, like on the database through Working
Mm-hmm.
Dog or whatever, and you see their IGP3 videos, and you're just like, why has this dog been bred
Yeah.
30 or so times? Are people watching these videos? Because
But and
I think
then
if
you
they
like
saw
you
it,
have some people that will, right? You have some people that actually will, but then you have other people that are just gonna go and see the paperwork and say,
yep,
okay, that dog's an IGP 3, 4 times. He has
yeah,
to be good,
yeah,
right? He has to be good. But that was also like one of the things that Debbie was seeing and was noticing within the sport, like because at that time, like Debbie was also like very influential in IGP. She was on those boards where they were having these conversations about removing things and placing things, and then when certain things started to get brought up and it started to become a consistent thing to where things were getting taken away and done away with, like I think the last instance was the whole thing with the stick hits, right?
yep,
Like that was like the last thing to where we were like, okay, yeah, no, we can't do this anymore. Like
yeah,
there has to be a different venue for this, and that's why also like for us, like we still have those, right? Like AS still has stick hits. AS does verbal pressure, like a lot of things that IGP does not do, right? IGP does not do verbal pressure on grips. IGP does not do you're not supposed to like wave your stick in front of the dog's face or like over the dog's head, or like there's ways in which you're supposed to do things, and it's so like it's so definitive now that it's losing the testing aspect.
Yeah.
And that's what Debbie was trying to bring back with what she's doing with AS. Like they're even still changing things. Like even now for your AS1, like there's a retrieve on the flat. By in June, they're now going to change that to a retrieve over a meter jump for your AS1, because there's also a big emphasis on shepherds not having good hips and not being able to jump anymore, right? So like Debbie wants to start to see dogs like start to be able to make those to do those things, to show those physical capabilities, right? Amongst just going from the testing and the protection and the testing and obedience, she also wants to test the dogs physically, like
Yeah.
make sure these dogs are also physically up to par to continue to do these things, right? So like just little things like that are continuously evolving and changing and are being added into play as just another way in which we can ensure that what we're doing in AS is truly, serving the purpose of, like I said, testing and continuing to produce, dogs that are constantly getting better and not necessarily deteriorating. One of the big things that she was on a podcast with Ivan, and they were talking about this, and like he was saying, like it got to a point with IGP to where she was like, what is stopping a poodle from doing it? What is
Yeah.
stopping a lab from doing it, right? And once we get to that point with the sport,
It's
like
just kind of like,
what are we
what
doing
are
at
we
that
doing?
point,
Yeah.
right? Like, what are we doing for the working dogs? Like, what do these titles now mean? Like, what if there isn't a poodle out there with an IGP? How are you really going to tell me your shepherd is like that badass? Like, like so if that competition level is there, or if unless like you truly just have like those one of a kind like standout dogs, right? Like outside of that, like if that is the reality of the sport, what are we truly testing at that point? What are
Yeah.
we actually really doing? So her biggest thing was like within developing this, like, no, a poodle should not be able to do this. A poodle should not be able to take this. A lab should not be able to take this kind of pressure, right?
Yeah.
That's the expectation. And like that's where I feel like with AS it stands out, but it's also very similar to PSA in the sense of like there is this notion around like the strong must survive in it, right? Like just as much as like it is a routine, and it takes a lot from like the grandfather sport of IGP, and like it has that professional kind of like outlook to it. There is a rugged side to it to where we are not necessarily like giving passes to dogs that
Yeah.
may not be able to make it, right? Like for like in my very first national, there was a notion like I want you to go out and test every single one of these dogs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like this is Debbie talking to me like as a guy doing the back half. I want you to go out there and test these dogs. Don't let any of these dogs, if you see anything or if you see a moment, you're given a little bit of leeway, right? Like if you see a moment to where a dog may not out or a dog may out, and you got they're telling you to freeze up, you can take a step or two, right? To just show like, hey, look, he may go, right?
Yeah.
Like if there is a instance to where you see something to kind of insinuate to a judge and let it be known like, hey, this is a weakness, show that weakness, right? And
Yeah.
that's the same thing that we have in PSA. Like if there's a dog that can't take some cans, set up the surprise scenario with some cans, and let's throw him at him. Like he has to. Let's see what he does, right? Like
Yeah.
that's where I feel like the two sports are very similar in the sense of like I said, not what they're testing, but how they're doing it, right? The main and where it's deriving from is deriving from this. We want to consistently produce or consistently say the dogs that are passing our test are truly strong dogs, are
Yeah.
truly dogs that are going to be able to take and withstand the work to any extent or to whatever extent you kind of want to put them through. We put them through the paces ourselves through our testing, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the whole idea behind it, and that's what really kind of attracted me to it as far as like over IGP, right? And me kind of wanting to put all my eggs into a basket there and say like this is where I want to do, because like I said, I also wanted to be in a position to where I can truly test and I have some type of leverage, right? I have an actual way in which I can say me as an individual, like with my speed, with my athleticism, with my size, right? I can test. Whereas with IGP, like if the way that everything is set up, you almost take all of that away from me, right? Like if I'm too fast, I have to hold my sleeve a certain way when I do my escapes. If I have a certain, or like if I had power in my step through, right, and I was able to kind of catch a dog there, I no longer have that because now my catches are static, right?
Yeah.
So like all my moments or all my instances of leverage or where I have an advantage to actually do some testing has now been taken away from me as a helper. So at that point, like, what makes me better than just a bite dummy, right? Like, on a trial, like, and that was my feelings towards it, and that's why, like, I gravitated so heavily towards AS, because the nature behind it and the idea behind, like, wanting to test only the strong really surviving and being able to kind of, make it through that kind of testing, or that form of testing. That was something that I felt like I wanted to get behind, because it was new. It still is new, but it was something that was new. It was something that has the right intentions, and it was also something that was challenging still for me. Right,
Yeah.
so like it kind of checked all the boxes for me, and it made it to where, like, why wouldn't I want to do this kind of stuff, or why wouldn't I want to be involved with it to some extent? One of the biggest things was, like, even when they had the detection, like, first they were using, like, narcotics, and then it became, like, hard for everybody to kind of, or they were using pseudo narcotics, and then it became hard for, like, people to get a hold of it and people to train for it, and then it was like, all right, well, like, this isn't much better than the tracking, because at least I can go out to a dirt field and track. Like, I can't even get a hold of this stuff to even, like, try to start training for my dogs. And then they started using the Pyrodex, which you could get at, like, Cabela's and stuff, and now, like, everybody's training detection. And, like, it's funny now, because now you're starting to see more, like, IGP people come in, and with the detection for IGP people, like, the tracking was a form of obedience,
Yeah.
right? So, like, now when you have, like, article searches and detection, to where, like, you just literally kind of have to sit at the end of that leash and let that dog, like, really work by itself. IGP folks are, like, having, like, aneurysms. Like, they're like, oh, that is much like, it's too much choices. He's doing too much. It's too much for him. I can't handle it. And it's funny to kind of see, like, them struggle with that transition, because there were also people that were like, tracking is not, like, the easiest thing. Like, tracking is not fun, but there are people that will tell you, like, no, tracking is it. Like, once you get it's therapeutic, and it's all woo-saw, and then, yeah, okay, well, smell these center blocks now. Let's see, like,
Yeah,
how do you
right.
like that, right? Like, it's just that give and take, and it's always present.
Yeah. Tracking has never felt, I mean, granted, I'm not out tracking all these dogs, but I've done a few tracks and it doesn't feel therapeutic to me, I'll tell you that.
And like I said, I ain't kicking up dirt in nobody's random field, nowhere. That ain't that. Nope. That ain't really made me.
You sound like Damon Wayans. Has anyone ever told you that?
No, no one's ever told me that. But I can see it. I can definitely see
If
it.
you play this back, and it's maybe I even thought about it because I was just watching White Chicks the other day, but you really do sound like him.
There's certain points where I was like, ooh, his voice kind of high. And then I'm like, well, my voice is kind of high. I don't really have the deepest voice. And then I just kind of left it at that. So it's funny that you bring that up.
What would you look for in a PSA, AS, or IGP prospect as a puppy, or even just a green dog?
So for me, like, and it's funny because, like, I've gone through so many dogs, like, so many dogs, like, from the very beginning. So, like, going back to the beginning, I had Xena. That was a Rottweiler. That didn't work out. She hit a point to where she was just like, yeah, no, don't really want to do this. Ended up rehoming her. I ended up I had another pit bull at home. Started doing stuff with her. Didn't really work out. She got like really kind of like into it, to where, like, it became like a little too serious for her, and I wasn't the handler for that at that point. So, like, we stopped doing stuff with her. Uh I ended up actually breeding her and then keeping a daughter from her. And then I have her daughter now with me. Um and I worked with her, and, like, she hit a point to where she was just like, yeah, no, this is not really what I wanted to do. And then I got a schnauzer, and,
I didn't know
like,
that.
yeah, I don't. I'm telling you, I done ran through them
You've
all.
been
I
around
done
the
had a
block.
Doberman. I done had a Schnauzer. I done had a little bit of it all. But through, like, all those dogs, like, I slowly started to form, like, what exactly I needed from a dog, and what would actually make me and a dog's relationship successful. And then I learned, like, I need a dog that is social but not too social, a dog that is stable environmentally. And, like, all this stuff sounds pretty trivial, and it sounds like what you just need for, like, a working dog, but it is and it isn't in the same sense. um I need a dog that can bounce back from things fairly quickly. I'm not really worried about if a dog is, like, thrown off by certain things environmentally, but if the dog can't bounce back, then for me, like, that's a little bit alarming. Like, I don't really like that. Like, I would need a dog that can, like, go through something, feel some adversity, and kind of bounce back, and be able to kind of, like, just jump back in the game or jump back into the flow of things pretty quickly. I need a dog that's a little bit more resilient, a little bit more forgiving. And when I say resilient and forgiving, me personally, like just me as a handler, like I am very like not stern, but like because I have a very loose style of training. But once I actually start to put expectations on things, like those expectations are to be held up, right? Like
Yeah.
I have a very like stern belief in like once you truly understand, right? Like once you truly understand what I'm asking of you, and I don't ask much, right? Very, especially in the beginning, I don't ask much. But once you understand those things now have to now become solidified and understood as that is the expectation for certain dogs. And I've had dogs to where like once you start to lay that expectation on them, and then you start to uphold that, like they kind of like they just
They're
like
like, nah.
go into their own shell, and they're like, oh no, 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 the bad guy, you don't know, I don't mess with you, like. And then I've also had dogs who where like they can care less about it, right? So
Yeah.
like I can't have a dog that's like too strong because then that just leads to me just being way too heavy handed. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't have a dog that's too sensitive because then now I can't even really do much with the dog. So like I need a dog that's resilient but forgiving. Like I need a dog that can take a little bit but also understands like why this is happening and doesn't really take everything like personal. And that's for any of the sports. Like it really doesn't necessarily matter because like I said, also with me doing all this, I've been trying to kind of devise a way or find a way in which I can develop like my dog specifically to do whatever sport I really decide because I like my dogs to kind of be like me in the sense of like one day I want to do like I want to take you out to a ring club and like let you learn some ring stuff. Then next week we can go do some like sleeve stuff and you can learn the bark and hold a little bit.
Yep.
Then after that, let's go see Uncle Dave in Long Island and go do some ratchet PSA stuff. Like
I
like
saw you were just doing that.
yeah, exactly. Like I want to be able to like do whatever it is that I'm doing in the moment with my dogs, right? So I try not to make it to where like if I'm gonna do PSA, I need this kind of dog, or if I'm gonna do AS, I need this kind of dog. Like in the very beginning, I need a very simplistic kind of outline. Like it's a very simple formula. Like I said, I just need you to be resilient, environmentally stable. I need a dog that is for somewhat forgiving. Food drive, play drive, all that stuff is like pretty important to me. But I feel like that's more so a given in a sense. And outside of that, like I do need a dog that is, like I said, sociable. Like I don't want a dog that's like I can't take anywhere or I can't do things with because I live in an apartment. I can't walk out in my hallway and like see, my neighbor come out the door and I got this Cujo like held up and like we got 2 feet of like I'm just not set up for that, right? Like I walk the streets with my dogs. Like I walk to Central Park. I do all this other stuff that my dogs they have to be like to some extent okay with being out in public. Like
Yeah.
like I don't need a man stopper in that sense. Like and outside of that, like that's pretty much it for as a pup. Like that's pretty much what I need. Like I just need those simple things, and I can mold, and I can build whatever else I need or input whatever else I truly need into the dog. But if you come with those little aspects, we're pretty solid. We're pretty solid.
Yeah. You just want a well-rounded dog.
Just a well-rounded pup. That's really all I need. Like I don't need him to be too high, too crazy. I don't need him to be, a dud either. But I just need you to, I need you to
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 do the
do the
things.
things, to
Yeah.
do the things, to do the things.
That's
And
why you like your
funny
shepherd.
that is why I love my shepherd because funny enough, like I say this all the time. Like so, I have my shepherd, and then I have Fi, which is he's a Mal Dutchy mix. Fi is more of the gifted athlete. Like if we
Mm-hmm.
play chuck it, like Fi physically, he'll always grab the ball. He'll always be the first to get the ball. Kaza is the dog that truly has more motor. The dog has more in like just internal will to do work for me because when I play chuck it with them, Kaza is the dog that will run just as fast out to get the ball. He's running just as fast back to me with the ball or without it. Like
Yep.
he wants to continue to do it and he has more of that motor and you can see like after 5 or 6 times Fi is more so like damn bro you're gonna throw it again and Kaz is more so like yeah go ahead I got 20 more times in me like he has more of an internal motor where he's not as like physically gifted as the other one but he has more will to work and
Yeah.
he makes the teaching things and doing things with him is just that much easier and I got another little ghost puppy that nobody knows about that he's almost the same way that he's showing me very good natural gifts but he's also showing me kind of that will to work that Kaza has so I'm like oh maybe I have a little bit of I didn't hit the jackpot and I done found me one of the diamonds in the rough but we'll
So for each sport that you're competing in and decoying for, what do you think the best breeds are?
So it's funny. So like IGP, I would say still like everyone. I can feel like everyone can kind of agree. Like a German Shepherd is still like the ideal dog for IGP.
Yeah, for
Right?
sure.
Like just the way like the dog's innate drives are set up, the way like the routine is more tailored to assisting the dog and going through that fluctuation of drives and showing the power of the dog and in those instances. It's basically designed for a German Shepherd. AS is a little bit different because I've seen a bunch of different breeds of dog be successful more in the AS system than like even your IGP system. So like I've seen Dobermans that are like really fucking like nice in AS. I've seen Rottweilers that are really nice in AS. I've seen pit bulls that are really nice and that probably should be doing AS. I've seen Dutch shepherds, Malinois that are like yeah, like those are, and because of the fact that like these dogs like most times these dogs didn't fit in IGP because they were a little too much. Like
Yeah.
maybe their aggression was a little too high, or like an IGP you didn't like vocalizing on grips, or you didn't like thrashing on grips too much, or these little aspects that these dogs were just using to show their power were things that we shunned, and we were like, oh no, the dog is not fit for that. In AS, like I said, we're looking for power from the dogs, however that may be. So even in protection, if you have a dog that's going to go in a drive and he's going to thrash and go out the pocket, we're not necessarily seeing that like as okay, the dog is like fighting for his life and doesn't want to be there, but maybe this is this dog's form of fight, right? Because you can also see if a dog is truly overwhelmed and saying, hey, I'm getting out of here because this is uncomfortable, or when a dog is like 120 pounds and it knows it and it's just going to drop his ass and just drag you whichever way it wants,
Hmm.
right? You can tell the difference between the two. So I've seen a couple different breeds truly be successful in AS to where like I can't say that there is truly like one breed that will dominate it or that is like designed for it.
That's
Um
interesting because I had expected you to say shepherds just for the similarities with IGP. So I think that's really interesting, and I think you even just saying that could really open people's minds to doing it with their dog who may be considered an off breed to one of the other protection
yeah, and
sport.
it's like even for like at the last trial that I was at, like even for the BTs, like there's no protection done in the BTs. But the BTs is still like that environmental test and that behavioral test, right? There was a Cocker Spaniel that did it with Teresa Courier.
Oh,
She
that's right. I saw with her
Yeah,
little
there was a
black
Cocker
cocker
Spaniel
spaniel.
that did it, and like she did it well. Like she didn't really like. There wasn't really too much trouble. It wasn't too many weird moments. Like she did well. There was a different. It was another Spaniel, or it was a I forgot the name of the breed, but it was like a Cavalier King Charles kind of like dog, but it was like a hunting dog. Also did a BT. Right, and like there's been a bunch of different people that have used like off breed and like and it may have just stopped at a BT,
Hmm.
but it's just created this venue to where like if you want to find out where your dog's nerves, no matter the breed or no matter the setup, no matter the background, like if you just want to find out where those things lie, AS has provided that kind of template to say, hey look, this is what your dog is okay with and this is what your dog is struggling with, right? And you can up the ante and keep going, or you can kind of take that for what it is and go on about your business.
Yeah.
um but yeah, like I said, like in AS, I've seen so many different breeds actually be successful, and it's funny enough, like the breeds that I've seen have the most trouble in AS have been shepherds
And
because there's so many of them.
and why what have you noticed they're having trouble with?
What I've seen is like most times you have like drive channeling issues. You have like issues to where like the dog doesn't necessarily understand what it should be doing in certain drives, so they display certain like off off-putting behaviors, or maybe like avoidance style behaviors, or certain aspects or certain instances or scenarios are a little tougher for them than these other dogs, right? So like I said, these other like Malinois or your Dutch Shepherds or your Rottweilers, right? Like they were a little bit more prone to the aggression aspect and that whole thing, right? So when you have like an attack out of the blind where a dog has to go from obedience to prey, right? And it has to make that quick snap into like a forward aggressing kind of expressive behavior. Those dogs that had a little bit more aggression, they're a little bit more inclined to do that, right? And do that well, as opposed to the shepherd that's a little bit more like systematic, and he's waiting on like this kind of almost a cue of some sorts of what the dog may be doing next,
Hmm.
right? and the dog doesn't get that, and then the dog is like almost blindsided by something that comes about to where the dog's like, oh, I wasn't ready for that, right? And shepherds are a lot more sensitive to things like that. They're a lot more intuitive to things like that. And when they start to catch on and understand like certain things are about to happen that makes them uncomfortable, that creates like a whole whirlwind of like worry and confusion, and like that's hard to get rid for them. But it's so true to the breed that they've been developed a certain way, and they've been developed to thrive in a certain style and a certain development, where you have literal lines that can't be with certain training systems because they just won't be successful, or like you have like these little like, or not little, but you have like these in-depth, like ingrained things in certain dogs that just can't be changed because there's so many years of piled on, like just consistent training, consistent, genetic improvision and all these other things that have now been put into play that make it to where like if certain things are not in play for those dogs, they tend to struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas like you have these dogs that have either less or no background in this stuff, to where you're just solely depending on the person or the personality of the dog and the drive set of that dog, and you're just showing them how to work with certain tools. They get more inclined and they get better at it, and then they start to do it way more and a little bit more efficiently than the dogs that were almost developed and built for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, and also there's just so many more shepherds in it than there are these other breeds that of course they're going to be the ones you see the most problems with, because they're making up a good majority of the population.
Yeah.
But even with the ones that are, even with the off breeds, like they have been pretty consistent in how they show. For like the Dobermans that come up in AS, like when from what I've seen, like they get developed pretty much the same way, and they run into the same kind of problems and they run into the same kind of stuff, but they kind of get over it the same way.
Yep.
And like even the like for the pit bulls and like the Rottweilers and all these like off breed dogs, like you run into, because of the way the system is, you run into this exact point to where you say, okay, this is where we might run into some struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doing secondary obedience with this pit bull, this is where we're gonna run into something, right? Or doing this control aspect with this Rottweiler, this is where we might run into something, right? It becomes very kind of definitive where exactly those moments for clarity are. Whereas
Yeah.
the Shepherd, it's a little bit misplaced, and it could be all over, and it varies from dog to dog, from line to line, so you have this kind of like fluctuating, way in which the dogs are now starting to adjust to the system, and we're starting to find out truly what dogs fit in it as far as like developing. And now, because we're going into 3-4 years of like breeding and developing dogs for this said sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're starting to find like what dogs are rising to the top of the sport and what dogs are kind of like falling off, and what dogs are just showing you like that kind of mid-tier kind of performance. And now you're starting to get a little bit more of insight as to what dogs are truly more built for it, which is giving us now better outputs and better puppies and things of that
Yeah.
nature. But as it stands right now, we're pulling all these dogs that were once PSA dogs, police dogs, and all like, and then we're trying to do these things with them, and then those are the dogs that are running into problems that I'm seeing.
So then, same thing. What breed do you think is best suited for PSA? Which obviously we all know what you're going to say, because it's same thing like IGP. I mean, it's just a collective opinion with proof.
For PSA, like it's the Mals and the Dutchies. They are the and it's because of like my dogs are a very clear example. Like Phi is very reckless. He is very like he has very little care for things. Like he's very kind of like he's a little slow. Like he's just a little not he's not all there, right? Which is like why when he does PSA, like he has the time of his life, because he can be all of that and like indulge, like he can fulfill every part of his like loose brain with all that goes on there.
Yep.
Whereas Kaza is like the exact opposite. He's a lot more lax, he's a lot more even keeled, he's a little bit more balanced, he thinks about things, and he's he you can already see he's much more suited to handle the type of work that AS is going to present him, because because of how we've even started developing him for protection and obedience and all the things that we've already started going through with him. Like he's already kind of being pre-exposed to, you know, thinking a certain way, behaving a certain way, and being and dealing with certain expectations, that now his whole demeanor as a dog is just a little bit more different, which would make him probably not the most ideal dog right now as it stands for like someone that was doing PSA.
Yeah.
Right, because he is very much the type of dog, like he will bark at you, and he has a very convincing like bark and hold, and he'll get real close, but you can still like move him around, you can still touch him, you can still do things with him that like PSA you can't do that. You don't send your dog into a guard and like tap on his side and manipulate him and move him around. You don't do things
Uh,
like that. It just doesn't happen,
yeah.
right? So they just show the disparity, but people in PSA love Fi. Like they love when they see him go out because he's like when I say he's reckless, the dog is reckless. He went for his. There's a picture of him doing a PSA one with I forgot who the decoy was, but it was the courage test, and the dog literally like did not jump. Now he's a KMPV dog. He has all that stuff behind him. He has all the Berry 2 stuff behind him. I don't know all the ins and outs and all the BRN numbers, so don't ask me. But he has that stuff in him, right? So like he goes downfield and does not jump. And if I show you the picture, he's literally like he hits the dude's stomach and he folds into the guy's stomach. So because he just pure just impact, and the dude's face is like ooh, and it's you can see like this moment to where like he was not thinking about jumping at all. At no point did he think I'm gonna jump up and bite this dude. But what he did was he slammed into him, and the moment that he realized what he did, he went up, grabbed him, and did what he had to do. Right, like but PSA people loved that. When they saw that, it was like, oh, he's a banger. Like, oh, like, and to me, I'm thinking with the I would like my AS mind and my like, I'm like, you just fucking almost killed yourself, bro. Like, why would you do that? Like,
Because
why
he's
would
a
you not
Mal.
jump? Why would you not just like do it the right way? But like I said, like PSA people love that. He is the dog. Like when I bring him out, people love how he looks. People love like the way he moves. People love like the obedience. And when I take him to like my AS workshops and stuff like that, like yeah, they like him and they like how he looks, but they're like they call him a Malinois. They're like almost confused about what he is. They see him do stuff and they see him like bark at me and like to get started and they're like, that's a little much. Like and then in the AS group, they love Kaza. Kaza is oh my god, he's amazing. He's great. To me, not Kaza's not mid, but it's like he can be so much better. But like they love him, right? Like they love what he does. They love how he works with me. They love his demeanor. They love all these things about him, and it's like that's because that dog is what they see. Like that's what they see as their ideal dog, or the
Yeah.
dog that they would really like for them to do their work in this sport. Same thing on the other hand. PSA people like Fi, and they love when he comes out, and they love when seeing him do stuff. And there's people that want to see me do more with him because they want to see him hit the field more, and they want to see him go out and do all the wild things that he wants to do, just because that's how the sport is, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I feel like as it stands right now, yes, for PSA, the Mals and the Dutchies, they definitely got it because they bring that ability to teeter that edge that we were talking about earlier between doing and not doing and making it
Mhm.
look like it was intentional. Like they
Yeah.
they give you that ability to kind of teeter that line and still give you all this power, give you all this effort, give you all this kind of like just maximize everything, maximize all the outputs, and that's what PSA is all about. Taking everything to the max at every point, usually, right? Like even in your PDCs and yeah, everything is we're trying to take it to the highest that we possibly can take it, and those are the dogs that consistently come out and deliver that as best as they possibly can for PSA, and that they've been consistent with those being the dogs that have always been on the podium for your nationals and
Yep.
all that stuff. And we even got PSA Worlds coming together and like
Yeah.
all that. Did you see that? Like we got
Yep.
all that coming together. Like that's gonna be cool. That's
I
gonna
was
be
waiting
dope.
for that. I felt it was coming either this year or
Yeah,
next.
yeah. Once we did the UK stuff, and I was like, all right, now we're going overseas, and then I started hearing India and all. I'm like,
Ireland.
yeah, like when? So like, does Worlds for PSA not ring a bell? Like, and
Yeah.
they damn sure did it. So it's like you have that now, and which I'm also really excited for that because even when I went over to the UK, like the way that they raise dogs and the way that they handle dogs and do things, like it's very much different. And they have a different caliber of dogs, and they bring a whole different kind of style to the whole kind of dog game that I wouldn't say people are unaware of, but how consistent it is out there is something that I feel like we'll look at and be like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, because they have very strong dogs, right? They have these very strong, hard hitting dogs, but they've also created this very good balance for the most part. They've created this very good balance between that strong, powerful kind of expression and protection and this very, convincing and powerful expression and obedience, which is something that we thrive for just as general, just as trainers, but something that in PSA hasn't really been prevalent. But that's something for them they really focus on, and that's what I saw when I was down there just in the UK, right? And I'm pretty sure there's other parts of the country that kind of adopt that as well. But I'm really kind of excited and curious to see just on that kind of stage, what exactly is everybody bringing to the table? Where is everybody's kind of values? Like, is this the same everywhere, or is this truly, the same for the sport, or is this just America's PSA,
Yeah,
right? Or is like, like I'm genuinely curious to see like what that field is going to look like, you know?
I'm eager to see how that pans out too. So,
Okay.
what are your short and long term personal goals for AS and PSA and then IGP as a decoy and helper, but also as a competitor?
Okay. So short term goals, let's start with PSA. Um, those I have with Fi and with him, like I just want to close out his PSA too. Like I said, he was a story that I got him from a situation that was not the best, and he was a dog, like kind of just like all my other dogs. Like he was a dog that I got in the midst of doing everything. I didn't really get him with intentions. Like I didn't get him from a puppy. I got him when he was like a year and a half. Like he was already developed. Like I had did work on the dog before he was even mine. Like the dog was biting me, and I was doing developmental work with the dog before he was even thought about giving being given to me. So for him, like I want to close out his career, or like his protection career, really, like with the two, like that would be ideal picture. Like I do want to at least try to trial him at least once, just to kind of see where we at this trial season, and see if we can pull it together, see if we can snag it. Like I said, he does other things. Like I'm pretty sure, like I'll end up doing some type of ring stuff with him, or I'll do some AS stuff with him, just to kind of, because he's only 3, so he's still very much in his prime. It's just for me, like I don't necessarily like enjoy training him for PSA because of the type of dog that he is.
Yeah.
I don't really enjoy training him for it that much, so I'm not gonna stress myself out about like going or making it a mandatory thing with him to go high levels. Um, AS as a handler. Kaza is like, he is that's like my golden boy right now. Like he is the main one that I'm putting the biggest push behind right now. Hopefully like we can get on one, which I'm starting to retrieves and stuff, and I've been scared of it because I haven't done it. He's the first dog that I've done it with, and that's another thing, is like now, like with me also like traveling and stuff, I'm also able to put more emphasis on my dogs and actually get them doing stuff and being on the handler side of things. And that's taken some getting used to for me a little bit, because now I have to go through trialing, and I don't really get trial nerves and stuff like that, but like I have to go through the developmental phases of developing a dog, and I'm still very new. Like Kaz is my first shepherd. He's as much, even though like I've done a fair share of stuff, like I'm hitting those kind of achievements as well. Like my first sports dog that I'm developing from a puppy up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Fi wouldn't even necessarily, like Fi would be my first title dog, but he wasn't like my first dog that I really kind of developed from a puppy up for a sport.
Yeah.
That's Kaza. So like for me to take him to, ideally at the end of it all, like I want him to have his AS3. After his AS3, like I said, I want to transfer him over to PSA, and there he can do whatever the hell he wants. I don't care how far he goes, but that'll be whatever it is. But short term is, I want to close out our one. Hopefully, if like by nationals, if we have like a good standing with how the one went, I may show him for his one at nationals, depending if I'm doing any help work there or not. But if not, he's another one where it's like it's slow and steady. Like there's no real rush for him, but that would be ideal. Like if we can knock out that one and possibly show at nationals, we had a good year for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I got my puppy, like my little ghost puppy, and I'm just kicking it with him. Like me and him, we just chilling. We chill on the
What
low.
sport are you going to do with this Malinois?
The Malinois, he's doing PSA, of course. Duh. Like, duh. What else would I do with him? But yeah, nah, he may do some AS stuff too, because like for me, like I develop all my dogs with like a AS foundation, in a sense, like with pillows and sleeves and barking and all.
Yeah.
So like just to so like the drive channeling is there, the clarity is there. It makes it easier to work on my outs and all that other stuff before I even get to like the suits and the environmentals, and I can do everything on the sleeve, like. And that's something that I got from my mentor. Like he was very big on like, you can do anything you want to do on the suit, on the sleeve. The suit should be the very last thing, and that was
Yeah.
one thing. Like I took myself, like I actually adopted, and I really started to see like in a lot of places this is the exact opposite. Like
Yep.
that is not what people do, and it was weird when I started going places. And I'm like, yeah, no, like he's 2.5, but yeah, just give him a sleeve, bro, and you could just use the cans, just use a sleeve. You don't have to use a bicep sleeve. You don't got to use a suit. Yeah, he'll bite it, but we don't need none of that,
Yeah.
right? And people were like, well, why don't you want him to bite a suit? You think I can't do it? No, I'm not saying that. Just give him the sleeve. This is what I asked you to do. Just do it,
Yeah.
right?
It's
But
funny
yeah,
that
so
you
like,
said that because a lot of people they want to rush, straight to the suit. And John works people's dogs all the time, like if it's at a different club or whatever the case is. And a lot of people might get taken aback that he's like, "Oh, your dog needs to go back on the sleeve, or your dog needs to go back on the wedge," and they're like, "My dog's on the suit, this, that, and the
uh,
other." And I'm like, slow down. Like we all,
and
foundations are
I say
important.
it all the time. And look, taking a step back, it is not as bad as everybody makes it seem.
Yeah,
Everybody did like you feel that way because you feel like other people are gonna feel some way about it. It's
yeah,
all right, bro. It's okay. You can take a step back. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong when ensuring that you got it right the first time. That's okay.
yeah.
If that's what we gotta do, that's what we gotta do. And it's happened a lot of times, like especially with me traveling, like you get, Big Joe Schmo wants to come out and yeah, my dog's on the suit and he's ready for this
And
and
the dog
that.
is like pulling, has a shitty
Dog's
grip,
pulling.
is
He's
like
like
tweaking.
right here. He's doing a little bit of this. He's like here. He three grips, but it's like almost there, and you're like, all right, let's give him a pillow. Are you sure that? Yeah, I'm sure, man. That's where we got to go with it. I'm sorry. And like you just it is what it is, man. But for me, like I said, like when I start my development for my dogs, is like that's all I really want them to see. Let them see a pillow. Let them make
Yeah,
sure the grip is stable. Let me lock in everything. Let me make sure all that stuff is looking right before I put them on your body. Then once the dog actually has all that in play, now we can really have fun and we can do all the cool stuff. But there's no rush for any of that.
yeah,
All that stuff is going to be developed the same way, whether we had the suit or without the suit. So I would rather stay without it and just kind of wait until we cross that bridge to get there to actually go and messing with that kind of stuff. But all my dogs usually get like the foundational elements of like drive channeling and environmental pressure and all that stuff on the sleeve. So
yeah,
that's the same host for the little guy. And yeah, like he's only like he's not even 6 months yet. So like there's a whole bunch of upside for him. He's another one like I'm really excited for. He's like I said, he shows me like a good set of like natural gifts and like natural abilities that I'm like wow, like all right, you're gonna be something. You're worth something.
yeah.
So he's like I said, but he's one like I'm keeping on the low. I'm not hiding my kid from the world. I'm hiding the world from my kid.
Petition to see more of your handling on your Instagram stories because I'll be honest, until you got your BT, I had no idea that you trained your own sport
And
dogs.
you,
I had
and you
no
know what's
clue.
so funny? Like I've been making like a whole thing about it, and I was talking to Jesse Cortez, and he was telling me like because I had told him the same thing. I was like, because he was helping me with Phi before I started like working, before I started really trialing with him, before he even got his PDC, and the last time I saw him, he didn't have anything, and I came back down, and this is when I had did like one of the trips down the coast, and he's like, I'm like, yeah, he has his one, and he's like, what? When did that happen? And I made a whole post about the dog having the one,
Oh,
but
really?
actually I don't think I did.
Okay, there you go. I had no idea you had a one on a dog. I didn't
I
even
don't think
know
I
that
did.
you competed ever in PSA.
But it's so many because I do it and it's just like it just happens. Like I'm just like whatever. Like yeah, like he got it. Like for me, I just never made it a thing. But like I said, I was talking to him and he's like, man, like you should like post more of your handling and like because yes, you're an accomplished decoy. You've done that stuff, right? Like, but I have a feeling like there's people that don't even know that you train dogs. Like
Yeah,
you don't know. I don't. If I didn't see it myself, like if I didn't know that you had these dogs, like I wouldn't know that you train these dogs. Like I see you play with them and I see you like they're with you, but I don't ever see them do anything or really achieve nothing. So like you're kind of like reputation or not even reputation, but your how reputable you are like as a handler. What can anybody go off of? And I was like, huh, you're right because like I mean he has a one, he has a PT. My little guy has a BT. Like I do go out and I do trial. Like I'm out there. Don't think I'm not. I'm
yeah,
out there. But yeah, nobody sees it. So but yeah, I definitely am making a point to kind of try to be a little bit more transparent about that aspect. I don't know why I am that way because I mean I'm like that with like a lot of my life, but that's just like one thing. Like I'm like, hey, like yeah, you can let the people know you're doing
Yeah,
stuff.
I think
Cause
it's
I was,
time.
I was, and I was at a point to where, like, especially in the beginning, like I would always post when I was like working with a dog, doing healing. I'm doing all the stuff. I did it all. I did the little healing videos and all that. Like, I did it. And then I got to a point where I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna do no videos. I'm not doing this for the internet. And and then now I'm just like out here doing things, and people don't even know like I didn't even did shit with my dogs, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh well, damn, nah, I actually do. And so like even when I say things like, or if I like give like handler advice, or like yeah, like people try to come at me like, well, have you handled and hold on now. Yes, I did. I actually have, and I don't blame you for not knowing, but we're not gonna play. I did, and throw some respect on my name just a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, nah, I'm definitely, especially with the puppy. Like I'm gonna start making more stuff centered around, me actually showing how I do stuff, making that a thing.
Yeah. I want to see some dumbbell stuff with your shepherd too.
Woo, woo. Well, look, we just got to the point to where he can hold it. Like I've just started actually transferring from PVC to an actual dumbbell, and I'm just doing it now. Like he has a dumbbell, and I'm just giving him the toy now because everything was the PVC was with food, so he's way more like toy motivated than food motivated. So now I'm just making it to where like dumbbells complete happy times, and you just want to take it and you just want to go out and do it. And he's liking it, he's enjoying it. Like I done got him to sit down and bring it to me all while holding it. Like we got some stuff going on. My boy's pretty. We all right, but I don't know if he's post worthy yet. We might need another week or so. Might need another week or so before a video about that come about.
Okay. So, what to look for in a decoy or a helper?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And this is our last one, so let's make it good.
Okay, that is a good one. So, and this is something that I cover pretty like extensively on my story most times, but as a helper and as a decoy, there's a vast difference between a trial helper and a training helper. Right? There's a big difference between the two. Trial helpers are there truly to test, and they are there to kind of push the limits and see exactly, what are the thresholds for your dog. Training helpers are there to do the exact opposite. And one thing about a training helper that I say to a lot of people is that a good training helper has to be very good at losing. That's the biggest key to a training helper. You have to be the best loser there is, because the whole premise of your job is to develop and build said dog or said team to a point to where they feel like they can take over and conquer the world, right?
Mhm.
Like that is really supposed to be what you're trying to do. So like when you're looking for a decoy and when you're looking for a helper or of any, in any extent for any sport, you want somebody that's knowledgeable. You want somebody that knows exactly like what they're doing and the whys behind it.
Mhm.
Like that's a big thing. Like for me, what I found like when I started traveling and going a lot of places, people were just appreciative of the fact that I was explaining things. Like after a session, like I'm pulling you to the side. I'm saying, hey, look, you had this trouble, and this is why this happened. This is how we can go about fixing it. This may be like what the process looks like for the next 3 or 4 sessions, but this is the promised land, and this is where we are.
Mhm.
Right? Like people appreciated that because they were not getting that. Like they would go to whole workshops, go to whole seminars, and so and so is going to do whatever he's going to do to your dog, and he's going to fix that in his way for the next day or two. But then after, when this person's gone and you don't have them, or you don't have somebody that works like them, you now have nothing because you don't even know why that person did that. You don't know what they were doing. You don't know what it actually is working on. You don't know anything. You don't even know what to tell the next person that you're going to work with. You can just say, hey, look, here's a video of what we did, and then you hope that that person can understand and see, like, so you just don't want to leave so much up to other people's kind of like perceptions and their kind of like wants and needs and how they want to do things. Along with being knowledgeable, understanding your whys, understanding what you're doing, you have to be with somebody or have to work with somebody that's receptive.
Mhm.
Like one thing about me is like I'm always like, if you go somewhere and like we've been doing a couple lessons, you go somewhere, you find something with somebody else that you find is like really working for your dog, right? And like it's giving you all this kind of like progress that you probably I didn't tap into, or so and so didn't wasn't able to get beforehand. Fine, great. What was it that was being done? Let's keep doing that. Right? Like you need somebody that is going to be receptive to, hey, look, this works for my dog, or this doesn't work for my dog, or can we try this, or I was thinking about possibly doing this. Like even just having a discussion, even opening it up to where there is something that can be talked about, as it pertains to someone else's dog. That's a big thing, and that's something that I feel like is very much missing in the decoy culture. It's something to where like everybody's developing their own style and their own way of developing dogs, and everybody's looking for this way in which they can develop their kind or their brand of dog. And they're saying like they do things a certain way and they develop a certain way, and that's just it. That's something that I feel like there's no real place for that in dog training in general, because nothing about dog training ever really stays truly consistent in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing ever really works for every single dog,
Yep.
right? You always have to tweak and adjust and add or subtract something in some way, shape, or fashion to help a dog or to work with a dog or to work with a team or to help a certain individual. Um yeah, and like so like be and even beyond that, uh you need somebody that's patient. Like I feel like that's a big thing, and it may sound like simple and it may sound like a little like cliche, but a lot of decoys aren't.
Yeah.
A lot of decoys are not patient. A lot of decoys are, or a lot of decoys even feel like almost pressed, right? Like pressed for results. Like especially when like you're paying somebody. Like if you're paying this dude $100 a session and you're paying him, once to maybe twice a week. Yeah, there is some expectation. Like, hey, like by a certain point, like I do want to be achieving certain things, but there also has to be the understanding that are those things that you're expecting in the time frame that you're expecting it truly realistic?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that it? Like, those are conversations that I feel like one decoys need to be better at having, but also a conversation that just needs to be brought about when we're starting talking about the exchange of money and with this type of service. Because
Mm-hmm.
as we know, like nothing with this stuff is linear. Nothing with this stuff is always, just straight up. It's always a bunch of all of this all over the kind of place. So it's like, and this is what I tell people, especially when they're talking about like protection stuff, and we're talking about like spending money and things of that nature. Because for a long time, like I didn't want to do protection for other people because I didn't want to take people's money because I didn't want to do it if I didn't have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
If I couldn't answer every question that I felt you were going to have for me, I felt there was no reason for you to be paying me. There was no reason for me to be taking your money. I can't do it, right? So now, like, with me being at the point that I'm at, if I'm going to, take your money or do business from me or do business with you, or if we're gonna go about a relationship in that way, I let it be understood like, hey, there is no real time frame on when we're going to achieve what we're going to achieve. We may get, major breakthroughs in 2 sessions. It may take us 10 sessions before we get to where we really want to get to, right? But like just understand that there is no guarantee with how this may play out, especially for like the new handlers or like the people that are new to the industry and don't really know like dog training per se and don't really understand how like that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like some people you don't have to explain that to, but other people you do, because you also start to deal with people that once they start spending money, expectations come about, and then they start to deal with this like a regular business, which this isn't, right? This isn't your trivial business to where you give me this money and your exchange is this exact product,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of variables and there's a lot of variance in that, and there's a lot of variance in the no matter who is doing it or who's working on it or how good that person is. Right? I've seen, dogs come from very good people that are just like, hey, look, I know a lot and I'm very skilled, but I just can't work with that. Right. Like, and there's other dogs that make very good dogs that make very mediocre people look like they know everything. Right. So
Yeah.
like, it's just, it's a constant kind of ebb and flow that we're dealing with in the industry itself. But if you can kind of cover those things, I feel like you'll be in a good place with whoever you're working with. Like if they can check those boxes, if they can cover those aspects, I feel like you're in a good place. At that point, you shouldn't have too many worries or concerns with how your dog is developing. If long as your helper or decoy is covering those things, you should be pretty good in my eyes.
Yeah. And you want to make sure that who you're working with doesn't have an ego, isn't just doing it, to make themselves look good or
Yeah, like
to further their own
exactly. Like
motives.
and that's another thing. Like, and I'm glad you said that. Like one of the things, like for me, is like I've always tried to maintain the fact that anybody that has worked with me or has like dealt with me understands like I tie very little of myself or little of my ego to anything that I do with the dogs. Right? Like I don't brag about the things that I've done. I'm not always online posting things that I'm doing, where I'm going, who I'm with, and like I don't do any of this really for any form of like external gratification
Hmm.
or any ego driven kind of like morale, right? Like, and that's not a normal thing. That is not a normal thing in the industry. A lot of people have the exact opposite, right? They have so much of themselves tied into this stuff. They have a very much of their being and their reputation tied into what they do and how they perform in and around this industry. And to some extent, that can help people. To some extent, that can be toxic, and it takes a certain individual, or it takes someone being aware to know and to be able to spot those kinds of people, because they may mask themselves as your friend, they may mask themselves as somebody that may be willing to help in the very beginning, and then you find out that shift starts to come about. It does suck when you realize that, but as time goes on and being just in the industry and around it, you start to get a little bit more hip to it, and you can kind of catch and find those people, and you can point them out a little bit better. And yes, it is something that, like, when you're looking for a decoy, like, please try to find somebody that doesn't really, like, have that kind of tie to it, because it usually isn't always the best setup. It usually isn't something that is beneficial for you as a handler, for the dog, or for anything that you guys usually have going on. So yeah, I'm glad you kind of touched on that, because that is something that is pretty prevalent in
Yeah.
the decoy community, And when you tie your ego into training, this is why I said, like, training helpers have to be the best losers. They
Hmm.
have to be very good at that. And that is hard for somebody, even in training, right? Like, to get down on the floor and let a dog beat you up for, a minute and a half straight, and, get some dirt in your eyes, get a little bit of dirt in your mouth, get some spit on your head. Like, it's some people that's too much, right? They don't want to give that, because they feel like they can test the dog in other ways, and
Yeah.
it's not really testing, right? Like, this dog needs that. This dog needs to be on all 4 feet on the ground, feeling like it's taking control of you. But now, the moment that the dog actually starts doing that, you want to flip him down and put him under you and put your body on top of him and then show how strong you are. And no, bro, now you missing it, right? So now your ego is having you do things that are not no longer beneficial. This is not helping no more. This is now just you just showing off. You're just trying to show how strong you are and how quick you can flip a dog and how you can make them, put them in a tough position and make them overcome these things. And yes, the dog is getting a little bit stronger through that process, but was that truly what the dog needed right there? Was that
Yeah.
truly what something that was gonna actually benefit the dog's mental approach to what we were actually doing? Right? Like, is that something that we even needed to be doing? You
Yeah.
know? Like, so, like, in that instance, yes, like, there's two very different sets and needs for an ego, but in training, it's very seldom is it ever really needed or prevalent or even something that's necessary.
There's times where dogs will come in, and if you don't fall to compensate for the way that the dog comes in, the dog could get hurt. And
Yep.
I've definitely seen people who will refuse to do things like that, just because they're like, oh, I'm not going to let a dog take me down. It's like,
Yep.
okay, wow,
Uh-huh.
you're so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And it's like,
That-
see, and I've seen that. I've seen that with suit stuff. I've seen that with sleeve stuff. I've seen it happen like in so many different areas, to where it's like that little bit of ego can cost somebody their dog,
yeah.
right? Simply because you may you may catch a dog on a long bite, and the dog kind of goes under the sleeve, and instead of just letting the sleeve go, you kind of want to pop the sleeve back, and you want to do all this kind of extra stuff that is like, hold on, buddy, that's a little bit extra.
Yeah.
Or you may catch a dog and catch a dog on a suit, dog kind of comes a little bit under, and he's just in a funny position, and instead of you probably just going down on the ground and just catching the dog and making sure the dog lands on all feet, you try to flail him out, and now the dog is all the way this way, neck all the way. You got, it's just extra stuff that people do for a cool picture or a
Yeah.
moment to where they're like, "Ooh, that was cool." That for a handler or for that dog, like, it was probably extremely dangerous or real
Yeah.
risky. Like, all because you wanted that quick little moment of adrenaline, or that moment to where you can say, "I did it" or "I proved it." And at some point, you do need an ego to do this kind of stuff. Like, you do need some type of ego to step in front of these dogs and to go out and do this stuff, right? Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, decoys, helpers, like, we are athletes. We like, and I'll be the first to say it, like, we have to adopt a little bit of that kind of, like, we are the shit a little bit, right? Like, we do step in front of, like, some serious dogs and do some serious stuff, right? And it does demand some type of respect, right? But in the same token, like, every good competitor has good sportsmanship, and with good sportsmanship, an ego is very low on that totem pole, right? Like,
Hmm.
I have just as much respect for every dog that kid sent my way and every competitor that steps on the field just as much as I have respect for the decoys that I'm working the trial with, or the helpers that I'm working the trial with, or the judge that I'm working under, right? Like I have so much respect for all these other entities and all these other parts of the puzzle that if I was to let my ego get in the way, it wouldn't even allow me to enjoy the experience.
Yeah.
It wouldn't allow me to even like really take in the full experience and be, who I am within that experience, because now I'm being something that I'm not. Like, and that's not the truth for everybody, and I wish it was. But like I said, it's just something that I hope to see, like, as time goes on, and in a way, like, I'm starting to see that there is more of a shift, but it's something that I would like to see, like, more of a focus be put on, as far as like just toss that to the side. Like, there's really no place for it here. Like, it genuinely isn't. Like, this is a place to where, like, what a big thing that I've been saying for years is, like, I'm just here for the dogs.
Yeah.
Like, I am just here for the dogs. Like, that is really all, and that's been my genuine motto since from all the way from Canarsie. Like, that was something that was instilled in me with my very first mentor, Marquise. Like, we're just here for the dogs. Like, it's this is what it's all about. It is not about how good you look. It is not like, none of those trophies have your name on it, right? The trophies have the dog's name on it, right? The medals go to the dog. Like, none of this is yours. Like, you didn't earn any of this. You were just out there pointing at stuff and saying words, right? Like, you were doing very little. Like, the dog is the one that deserves the accolades, deserves the moment of recognition, deserves to have that ego, right? Like, the dog is the one that actually, if anybody's deserving to have any kind of ego or to feel any kind of way, it's the dog, right? So,
Yeah.
like, for me, it's always been like, I'm just here for the dogs. I'm here to make these dogs feel like they are the shit. I'm here to make these dogs feel strong. I'm here to make these dogs feel capable, just as much as I'm here to do the same for these handlers, right? Like, that's that's what a true helper is to me, right? Like, that's what it means when I say helper. And usually I don't even really like using decoy, because I feel like, and this is just me, like, there's like a certain connotation with decoy that just implies like a person that can just go out there and just kind of be in the mix. Like, you serve a purpose, but it's not a true definite purpose, right? Because a decoy can be very well experienced, or a decoy can just be, hey Susie, do you want to get in a suit and put your arm up? Like, like, she's a decoy today, right? Like, then you have helpers, and for me, like, a helper holds a very much a different kind of like a different connotation to it, a different kind of like, there's different things attached and different feelings attached to that. So when I say helper, and I use that a lot, even when I'm working with PSA people, like, I'm the helper, like, because I'm helping and I'm doing so much and I'm wearing so many hats that I'm much more than a decoy.
Yeah.
Right? I'm much more than that, right? And I try to provide much more than that. That's just been my reality. So like I said, I'm just here for the dogs, and that's always been what it is, and what it always will be for me. And that's how I started it. That's how I plan to end it. Like, just doing this for the dogs.
Yeah. And I think the irony is, at least for most dogs, they're just doing it for us.
They're just doing it for us, right? Like, and that's the funny part. Like, they could care less. Like, they could really care less. This is just, hey, bro, this is what we do.
Yeah. It's funny just because, like, closing out. You good, bro? We're almost done. Don't worry. You're
Yeah,
closing out a title like last year, or no, I think this was 2 years ago now when Fuego won the regional champion. Like,
uh,
everyone's just like, oh Fuego, and like, I'm just putting him in his crate for bed. I'm like, okay, good night. Here's your dinner, buddy. Like, it's just
yeah,
for the dogs. There's no
uh,
difference. I'm like,
yeah.
he wakes up the next morning. I was like, good morning, my little regional champ, and he's
He
just
don't care.
like, bitch, open the gate. Let me go. Let me go to the
Hey, what the
bathroom.
fuck are you talking about?
But yeah, I really value your insight on these things, and I think we got some really good conversation in. Um,
Yeah, this is dope.
there
This
were
is
a
cool.
lot
I
of
really
people
like
that
this.
were excited for this episode, so I'm excited
Well,
to get it
I
out.
hope I hope I lived up to the standards, y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed.
So thank you everyone for joining the podcast, and we hope you have a great day.
Yes, yes.